The history of Captain Jean-Luc Picard. Jean-Luc Picard was a celebrated Starfleet officer, archaeologist, and diplomat who served during the latter two-thirds of the 24th century. The highlights of his career were centered around the assignments as the commanding officer of the Federation starships USS Stargazer, Enterprise-D, and the Enterprise-E. In these roles, Picard not only witnessed major turning events of recent galactic history, but played a key role in them as well. From making first contact as captain of the Federation's flagship with no fewer than 27 alien species, including the Ferengi and the Borg. He also became the chief contact point with the Q Continuum, and served as arbiter of succession, where he presided over the installment of Chancellor Gowron. Picard would expose the Romulan Star Empire as backers of his chief rivals, later aiding a Romulan underground movement of dissidents to gain a toehold in the Romulan homeworld. He continued to serve as captain of the Enterprise-E, the sixth Federation starship to bear the name, until at least 2379. Captain Jean-Luc Picard's serial number is SP-937-215. Currently the rank of captain. Most recent assignment, commanding officer of the Enterprise-E, from 2372 to 2379 at least. His previous assignments include ensign on the USS Reliant, not the one from Star Trek II, commanding officer of the USS Stargazer, NCC 2893, and commanding officer of the USS Enterprise-D from 2364 to 2371. Childhood. Jean-Luc Picard was born in Le Bar, France, on Earth to Maurice and Yvette Picard. On July 13, 2305, he and his elder brother Robert spent their childhood tending to their family vineyards with their father. Concerned about the preservation of their family values, Maurice and his wife educated their sons in the ancient traditions, avoiding in particular any superstitious technologies. As a young boy, Jean-Luc watched his grandfather deteriorate from a powerful, intelligent figure to a frail wisp of a man who could barely make his way home. One of Picard's childhood heroes was Dixon Hill, a fictional detective living in the early 20th century. As a child, Jean-Luc took piano lessons but eventually gave it up because he dreaded performing in front of an audience. In his later life, he would regret doing so because his playing used to please his mother. Young Jean-Luc dreamed of adventure and exploration. He was fond of starships, of which he liked to build models. Moreover, he was captivated by the Phoenix, the first human warp-capable starship, of which he admired several times in the Smithsonian Institution, but was never able to touch. Although Maurice intended his sons to work at the vineyard, it was obvious that since a very early age Jean-Luc knew he wanted to join Starfleet, something that his father would never condone up until his death. Jean-Luc would later remember that he devoted his childhood for that end. His brother would later note that Jean-Luc always sought higher standards, such as becoming president of his school and later valedictorian, and even an athletic champion. Robert was also jealous at seeing Picard being the favored son and getting away with his mischiefs. Sometimes Robert had to bully his younger brother. Despite Picard having been born in France, he had a distinct English accent. According to TNG Code of Honor, by the 24th century, French was considered an archaic language. Picard remembered French children's songs such as Frère Jacques as mentioned in TNG Disaster, and played by him on the Ressican flute in TNG The Inner Light. He also occasionally cursed Merde in times of stress, such as in The Last Outpost and Elementary Dear Data, and spoke at least basic French. Picard's academy years. Jean-Luc caused quite a stir by leaving his family's generational vineyard and applying to Starfleet Academy. Although he failed to gain entrance on his first attempt, Picard succeeded in the second attempt in 2323. He subsequently became one of the most outstanding cadets in his class. Picard's career at the Academy was difficult at best. Years later, Picard credited the Academy groundskeeper Boothby with helping him develop a more mature attitude. Among Picard's friends at the Academy were Donald Varley, Cortan Zweller, and Marta Battenside, and an acquaintance called AF, whom he blamed for failing the semester of organic chemistry, and whose initials Picard carved into Boothby's prized elm. At the Academy, Picard developed an interest in archaeology. His professor, Richard Galen, encouraged him to continue in this field, but Picard ultimately refused the offer of becoming an archaeologist. He would nevertheless keep his interest in the subject and became to be considered quite knowledgeable in the field. Picard also excelled in sports. He won the Starfleet Academy Marathon in April 2323, becoming the first freshman to win the race. During a wrestling match, Picard caught a Lingaran with a reverse body lift and pinned him down in the first 14 seconds. During his sophomore year, Picard was assigned to training on Morkin 7, where he had his first encounter with Nausicaans, who had an outpost on a nearby asteroid. Early Starfleet career. Shortly upon graduation in 2327, Picard's promising career nearly ended abruptly during a layover at Starbase Earhart. During a bar brawl over a rigged game of Domjot, he was stabbed through the heart by a Nausicaan and had to undergo emergency surgery to replace his heart. He later related to Wesley Crusher that he had laughed after looking down and seeing the knife pointing out of his chest. This event helped him realize how fragile life could be, and thus made him more willing to take risks and make his mark in the universe, which he only realized when Q allowed him to change this event in 2369. As an ensign, Picard was posted to the USS Reliant, where he served with Lieutenant Nakamura. As a junior officer, Picard was closest of friends with Walker Keel, and also became friends with Jack Crusher and his fiancée Beverly Howard. Picard demonstrated his command abilities earlier in his career, in particular when he led an away team on America 3 to save an ambassador. This incident would later be mentioned by Q as one of the crucial events forming Picard's personality. As a young lieutenant, Picard attended the wedding of Sarek's son, where he briefly met Sarek and Spock for the first and only time before the 2360s. Jean-Luc Picard's service on board the Stargazer. Picard was assigned as a flight controller on board the USS Stargazer in 2333. As a lieutenant commander, he assumed the command of the vessel when the captain was killed on the bridge. Starfleet awarded Picard a promotion to the post of captain, making him one of the youngest Starfleet officers ever to attain the position. Picard remained in command of the Stargazer for 22 years. In 2342, Picard dated a young woman named Janice in Paris. However, he became afraid of a possible future relationship and left Janice, who later married Paul Mannheim. During the Cardassian Wars, the Stargazer was involved in a truce offering by the Federation. After making contact with a Cardassian warship, Picard lowered the ship's shields as a gesture of goodwill, but the Cardassian commander ignored the gesture and disabled the Stargazer's weapons and impulse engines. The Stargazer managed to regroup and flee. In 2353, Picard was on an away mission when he saved the life of one of the team members at the expense of another. Jack Crusher was lost in the line of duty. Picard met with Crusher's widow, Beverly, on Starbase 32 to present the body. It was one of Wesley Crusher's earliest memories. In 2355, the Stargazer was seriously damaged in a battle with an unknown enemy vessel, later discovered to be a Ferengi ship. Picard managed to destroy the enemy vessel using the Stargazer's warp engines, in a unique tactical maneuver later named the Picard Maneuver, but they were forced to abandon the Stargazer. His actions during the battle were called into question by Starfleet prosecutor Filipina Loveris, but he was exonerated by the Inquiry Board and later awarded the Green Kite Order of Tactics, Class of Excellence, for the development of the Picard Maneuver. The encounter with the Ferengi vessel, also known as the Battle of Maxia, eventually came back to haunt Picard. Damon Bach, whose son was killed in the battle, twice tried to exact revenge on Picard. Captain of the Enterprise. In 2364, Picard was assigned command of the newly commissioned Galaxy-class starship USS Enterprise-D, the most prestigious captaincy in Starfleet. He commanded the flagship for 7 years, participating in many important missions. Among these were the defeat of the Borg invasions of 2366 and 2369, and his command of the fleet which blockaded the Klingon-Romulan border during the Klingon Civil War. What Picard did for the 9 years between the Stargazer and the Enterprise is unknown, and has never been discussed in any Star Trek production. The amount of time would have been sufficient enough for him to command another ship, but Picard has never mentioned any other command besides the Stargazer and the Enterprise. The novel, The Buried Age, filled in many of the gaps, including Picard's first meetings with Troy, Data, Yar, Catherine Janeway, and Geordi LaForge. Picard handpicked most of his senior staff, such as 2 young officers who impressed him enough on the first meeting. Geordi LaForge once piloted Picard's inspection tour shuttle and stayed up all night to refit an engine part that Picard had made a passing comment on, and Picard witnessed Natasha Yar risk her life to save colonists amid a Carnelian minefield. He also picked William T. Riker as his first officer and promoted him to commander, sight unseen, because he was impressed by the young officer's record of independence. Mere months after taking command, Picard was offered a promotion to Commandant of Starfleet Academy, with the rank of Admiral, by Admiral Gregory Quinn, but he turned it down to retain command of the Enterprise. Although Picard often heatedly defended a strict interpretation of the Prime Directive, he broke it on numerous times when he felt it warranted. Thus, in 2364, he allowed an Edo woman to confront her god from space. And in 2366, Picard later brought a Mantican leader on board the Enterprise so as to undo the damage done by cultural contamination. Furthermore, in 2370, the Enterprise, by the hand of Nikolai Rozhenko, transported a primitive group of Belerians on board from Borai II before an atmospheric dissipation rendered it uninhabitable. Although in the violation of the Prime Directive, Picard ordered that the Belerians be resettled. In 2371, the USS Enterprise-D was lost over Viridian 3, with the vessel's primary hull crash landing on the planet's surface. Picard also met the legendary James T. Kirk while in the Nexus with him, and recruited him in defeating and killing Dr. Tolian Sorin before he could have had the chance to destroy the Viridian system. There were no fatalities on board the Enterprise, and most of the ship's senior crew was reassigned to the Enterprise-E, the 6th Federation starship to bear the name. Picard was installed as a commanding officer and given a new authorization code, Picard 47 Alpha Tango. After a 1-year shakedown cruise, the new Enterprise was nearly lost when the senior staff decided to sacrifice the ship in order to save Earth's future by preventing the Borg on board from changing history. Fortunately, the crew was able to repel the Borg attempt without having to destroy the Enterprise. 2 years later, in 2375 AD, Picard ordered the USS Enterprise-E to the Baku planet in the Briar Patch, when it appeared that his operations officer, Lieutenant Commander Data, had malfunctioned and assaulted members of the research team there. Picard was able to capture Data and uncover the plot by Admiral Matthew Donnery, the Sona, and some of the Federation Council to relocate the Baku against their will. Picard rebelled against Donnery, bringing word of his actions to the public. Picard was able to protect the Baku and stop the Sona leader from destroying the Baku homeworld. Picard continued in command of the Enterprise through 2379 AD, when the ship was sent to Romulus after a coup by the praetor Shinzon. Shinzon was a clone of Picard created by a former Romulan government. They intended to replace the captain with the spy of their own. Following a change of government and concern that it would lead to war, the plan was abandoned and Shinzon was sent to Remus to die. Instead, he prospered, becoming a highly successful leader during the Dominion War. Shinzon used a Thalaron radiation weapon to eradicate the Romulan Senate, and he had planned to do the same to Earth. He needed Picard in order to repair faults in his own genetic makeup. In a pitched battle between the Enterprise and Shenzon's flagship, the Scimitar, Picard was eventually able to board the enemy ship and eliminate Shenzon. Data saved Picard's life by transporting the captain back to the Enterprise before sacrificing his own. He destroyed the Scimitar by firing on the Thalaron weapon with a hand phaser, thereby saving over 800 men and women on board the Enterprise. Background information. Picard was played by Patrick Stewart in all of the character's television and film appearances. According to the Star Trek Encyclopedia, Robert Justman said that Picard was named after the oceanographer Jacques Picard. According to the Star Trek The Next Generation companion, the original casting call was sent out to all agents asking for the following: Captain Julian Picard, a Caucasian man in his 50s who is very youthful and in prime physical condition. Born in Paris, his Gaelic accent appears when deep emotions are triggered. He is definitely a romantic and believes strongly in concepts like honor and duty. Captain Picard commands the Enterprise. He should have a mid-Atlantic accent and a wonderfully rich speaking voice. The character of Picard changed quite a bit from the March 1987 version of the Writer's Director's Guide. In that guide, he was born in Paris, carried a touch of French phrasing in his speech, and pretended that France is the only true civilization on Earth, remnants of Pavel Chekhov. Also considered for the role of Picard was Lou Gossett Jr., Yaphet Kotto, James Earl Jones, Billy D. Williams, Avery Brooks, and Keir Dullea. At first, Gene Roddenberry's acceptance of Patrick Stewart as Picard was conditional. He said, "But when we bring him in for the studio, I want a final edition. I want him to wear a wig. Because I don't want this guy going in bald," Rick Berman remembered. Via a phone call to London, Stewart had a wig made by one of the most well-renowned theatrical wig makers in England, then had the wig dispatched to America. When TNG supervising producer David Livingston first met Stewart, the actor visited Livingston's trailer with a box of wigs and asked where he could find the makeup and the hair staff, as the production crew wanted to see what he looked like with the wigs on. Stewart eventually found someone who could help him put on the wig. He then auditioned for John Pike, who was already well aware that Stewart was really bald. He had seen all the pictures of him, and we had played him a tape of Patrick's clips, Berman noted. Ultimately, John Pike opted for Patrick Stewart rather than Stephen Mock. Pike did so with one extra piece of advice: that Stewart lose the wig, remarked Berman. That was the best 3 words he could have ever heard. In a one-line memo to Helen Mosser, sent Gene Roddenberry on May 1st, 1987, Mossad announced Patrick Stewart's deal has finally been finalized and sent to his agent for his signature. Hey, thank you for watching the history of Captain Jean-Luc Picard. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you can. If you've already done those things, thank you. And have a great day. Bye-bye.